Welcome back to another edition of the Convergence. I'm excited today. I've got a local with me today.
Phoenix, baby.
Yeah, Phoenix, baby. Josh Topel, who is the CEO of Digitile, which is a local company here in town. And I was so excited to connect with you because there's so many things, Josh, that you're doing right now that are so applicable to my other business, which is that process improvement, process automation business. Thanks for being here with me today.
Absolutely. Small correction, Chief Product Officer, co-founder, not CEO. All good.
We gave you too much credit. Chief Product Officer. So you're the one that actually does the work is what you're saying. No, we don't want to say that with if your CEO tunes in and listen.
Cover the ears out there.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about your journey into AI. I mean, we've highlighted a couple times on this show that there are literally thousands of new startups in the space. Are you a 60-day-old startup? I guess is the first question.
No, we're a 120-day-old startup.
Oh, great! So you guys are the grandpaps of this thing.
We're the grandfathers. Yeah, that's a great question. My journey into AI actually. So it's funny. I started my career at IBM. And IBM actually was, they were probably one of the leaders in bringing AI to at least the general public.
Sure.
But they didn't do it well. And so I was at IBM during the whole IBM Watson release.
Yeah, I remember the Watson.
I think everybody in the world can probably attest to it was a phenomenal marketing scheme. I mean, just amazing marketing. However, the AI behind that was just wasn't ready for the general public. Yeah. I could give you a small testament to. I used to work in New York. I go into the office, and there was an entire floor, 7th floor, dedicated to this real life interactive demo for what now is become this public craze, which is going to be how the world shifts. We'll get into that. But you literally walk into the room, and there's a panel of screens, and you could pick the persona that you wanted to take to go into this massive demo. So if you stand next to a doctor, which is what I did, you stand next to the doctor, and then you go into this 360 room where they have the Watson brain, and you go in there, and as the doctor, it's taking you through this entire experience of diagnosing a patient. And the entire thing was phenomenal, like just absolutely perfectly executed, but it was all a show. It was all trying to demonstrate to people, how does this actually translate into use cases, into real, how do I actually use this in real life? And I'll say, this was back in 2013, 2014. This is like the world just wasn't ready at that point.
Yeah.
So we're now getting to the point where AI has shifted and we're starting to put use cases behind it, strong use cases behind it. And I think that's where ChatGPT has really done a really good job. And so Digitile is putting a use case behind using generative AI. In a nutshell, what we do is we help e-commerce brands scale their product catalog with generative AI, right? So we take an image and we analyze the image and we generate attributes about what's going on in that image, product image. And then from there, we take the attributes we create and we write product titles, product descriptions, SEO titles, SEO descriptions, right? There's a bunch of companies that do this ad hoc, right? We do this for companies that have 10, 50, 100,000 SKUs at scale, right? So we're taking their product catalog and we're generating all of the miniature attributes about their products. And then we use that to dynamically feed it into generative AI. But the key element also is we need to take in a bunch of inputs, right? Like we need to understand who's their audience. What is their brand tone? What's the target demographic that we want this to land with? All of that gets factored in to the output.
It's all prompt engineering, right? I mean, what you're saying is your prompt engineers, which I've been saying for 3 months is like the hottest thing out there. Understand how to communicate with an AI, because it's not go to Google and say, what's a good Thai restaurant in my neighborhood, right? No. It's a totally different thing than that. And I think we've unfortunately spent 20 plus years learning how to make inquiries of databases in a way that is not relevant at all anymore.
Yep.
And I love that that's what you're doing. You're fixing that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll say it's the near-term problem that the market can understand, because the long-term problem that AI is solving can solve way beyond that. Right. It's like, that's sort of I'll say the underlying tone between where I started my career at IBM and where AI was to now is the public's perception of what it can do for them and how real it is. And so, Google and Microsoft, they're layering it into their suites, right? Yeah. Eventually that'll become sort of the baseline. People will start to use it in writing an email or expanding on a spreadsheet. And then the use case is the line is going to move. The sensories, I look at AI as different sensories in terms of where it's going. Right now we're
Explain that a little bit. Yeah, I'd love to hear that more.
Yeah. So, all right. So right now we're in sort of the foundational phase and we're dealing with like text, right? So the next sensory is vision, image, right? So if I take a picture of something that's broken and give it to ChatGPT, can it tell me how to fix it? Right. So then,
can it connect to a 3D printer and print the part out that I need? Would even be even more ideal.
That would be even better, right? So so you get into vision. The next wave of vision is video. So if I can create a video where I have audio context and the visual, and then say, okay, ChatGPT, tell me how to fix my car, right? Then you can take a video of your engine, what's going wrong. You have context, you have the visual of it. It gives you a 5-step plan on how to change your oil for those who don't know how to change oil. But, and then that last sensory is touch, right? So, Boston Dynamics is doing crazy stuff with robots, right? They're already connecting it to, audio, visual, prompts. When you connect, audio into a robot and say, hey, go make me an omelet. How close are we getting to iRobot with Will Smith, right? Like, that's sort of how I see this evolving, and it's already happening that way.
Well, I saw an ad on Facebook last night for somebody that has a dog. This is a, robot dog that's integrated into ChatGPT. So literally you have a dog that walks around your house, a robot dog that you can talk to, and it will reply back using the ChatGPT database. I had the guys the other day from Mr. GPT on the show. They have if you check it out, it's like MrGPT.com. It's essentially, they created a persona of Mr. T, and Mr. T reads the results of ChatGPT to you, but he does it like, I pity the fool that would do this. So it's sort of cool. And I've learned this with ChatGPT. I didn't realize that I actually have now trained ChatGPT Plus I've given it my persona. I've had it read my books. I've written multiple books. I've had it watch. It's MrGPT.app is what it is. And it says, what's up, sucko, when you show up to it. But I've actually gone now and using the paid ChatGPT Plus. Every day I'm feeding it more information about me. Hey, check out my LinkedIn bio. Hey, watch this YouTube video of me talking. I want you to listen to this podcast. I want you to read this article. I'm feeding all those in. And now when I go into ChatGPT, I immediately say, you're going to be communicating with me as Derrick Maines. And all responses should come back using my phraseology, my stories. And I'm pretty impressed so far. I think I probably need another week of feeding the beast. But at that point, I believe, I've been telling everybody my new book, Adaptagility, which dropped on Monday, the title was created by ChatGPT. I had it read the book and I said, what would you name the book? And it said, I would name it Adaptagility, Overcoming Biological Resistance to Change. And I'm like, pretty good. It's because I never used that word in the book. I never made the connection between the word adapt and agility. I used words like resilience and other things. And it came through and said, no, let's just create a new word and we'll just figure it out this way. I'm like,
it generates a new perspective for you even, you know what I mean? Like the creative juices are, you got to get going. And then once you get going, it's like you start hitting that flow state. But if you could skip,
Oh my God.
If you could
writer's block,
right? Yeah, totally.
As somebody who's written 4 books and probably has 8 other ones halfway done, as my wife likes to say, well, Derrick, you're 90% there with only 90% left to go, And it's like, but being able to break through that writer's block and actually jump in there and say, here's something that I'm working on. I just did it today with another book that I'm working on. I fed it some ideas and I said, I want you to give me some analogies, tell me some story, make up some fictional stories about this. Now, I'm not going to use that in the book, but what I'm actually going to do is read through that to get a perspective that I myself cannot get and cannot take, throw that in there, and then start to build from that. And this is, to your point, writer's block and creative block is a real thing, and it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It has been eradicated from this planet in the last, well, we're going to be 120 days here in 2 days since ChatGPT really launched out into the marketplace. So that's what we're looking for. I mean, we are looking for augmented individuals and augmented companies, as Mike Harushka, who's an AI influencer, says. We want to augment people. We don't want to replace. Yes, McKinsey says they're going to replace 80% of jobs by the end of the decade. Okay, fine, but they're going to be replaced with something.
See,
they're going to be replaced with super smart people.
I don't know if I buy into that statement. I think jobs will alter, and you said it in the beginning. It's like you're a prompt manager, right? So prompt engineer. Thank you. So right now, like I use an example of like I'll say truck drivers are sort of resistant against autonomous truck driving, right? But it's like at some point when that does become a thing, whenever it does, truck drivers are going to need to evolve and turn more into like flight engineers, right? Where they're overseeing
systems.
So they're overseeing, 5-6 trucks that are driving on the road. And if something goes wrong, they're the first one to sort of oversee how to diagnose that. It's the same thing with prompt and, with how the jobs are going to change with ChatGPT. You still need to have reasoning in order to sort of navigate it in the correct way. And honestly, I've been talking about this a lot recently. It's like a lot of people have asked me, where do you think schooling's going to go and how people are being taught? And, do we really need to be good mathematicians anymore? Probably not. Probably not. We need to be taught how to ask the right question and understand the right question to ask. Because
that is critical thinking skills are where it's at right now. And this, I think it applies in literacy, of course. I think it also does apply in enumeration, in mathematics. We don't need to be able to perform the calculations, but I have to understand what Newton's theory was. I have to understand what E = MC squared means in order to apply it to an AI to get a result that is going to be relevant to the field of practice that I'm in. And I think we've really, you mentioned education, it's one of the things I love doing is going out and doing these CEO roundtable breakfasts because you get so many different perspectives. And I had somebody yesterday that actually said, or Tuesday, I guess it was, that said, what are colleges going to do? And I'm like, I can't think of anything that they would be good for anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't pivot and figure something out, but they better start doing it fast.
Yeah.
Because right now, if I had ChatGPT when I was 16, I grew up, a lot of people know on this show I talk about, I grew up very lower middle class, never met anybody that went to college till I was 25 years old. It just wasn't even an option in my life to consider going for higher education. I had to get a job when I was 13, right? So I didn't have access to those things. I couldn't get a ride to the library. What kids have today is truly incredible. They can create super intelligence in themselves by augmenting themselves. And I think augmentation is one of those deals. I gave a breakfast this morning and somebody said, do people really think that we're going to just all use this technology? And all I did was hold this up. And I said, anybody here have a cell phone? Because 20 years ago, you all said the same thing. I'm not going to carry a phone around with me.
It's honestly,
you augmented your life.
it's ChatGPT. That's sort of the Kleenex. There's more than one version of it, but that generative AI it's going to be the new eventually it will probably turn into the new operating system of how we surf the internet, how we get information. And, Google searching as we know it won't be the same. SEO, people that are trying to game the system, as SEO won't exist because you're not optimizing for a search engine anymore. You're optimizing for a neural network that is plugged into a bunch of real-time data.
I'd like to spend a minute to talk about neural networks, because I wanted to make this point a little bit earlier. When you talked about Watson, right? Older versions of AI really were just, if-then equations programmed into a computer in mass, right? You go into Excel and you write a macro, or you write a formula, and you're giving it a little bit of instruction on what to do. And really, the truth is, a lot of the early AIs were just massive databases that had every potential question that you could ask in there. They weren't doing this generative piece. They weren't, and I know some of them had early neural networks, but talk a little bit about how different that is. As somebody that's come through this industry, how different is that infrastructure inside those devices now compared to back then? Because generative AI doesn't actually have to know the answer. It can go figure out the answer.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the simplest way to describe it is the architecture is built very similarly to a brain, right? And you have different elements. That is this, like, for anybody who, doesn't know how it works or doesn't understand it. Yeah. It was architected the exact same way that we've understood the brain to work. And the brain has, it has different elements to it that all feed in and play a role in the results. And so, to your point, right, like, there is a database is true to source and it's true to fact. It holds all the answers. It knows all the answers, but the person asking the question needs to know exactly where it lives. So the brain, the brain has the frontal cortex, and that focuses on elements. My fiance,
as I'm writing the word prefrontal cortex here, because I'm going to give an explanation on that right after. So thank you for the perfect setup. Please go ahead.
My fiance is a doctor. I won't even go too deep into that, because she will check me hard on that. But
totally.
Each element of the brain is playing a role. And so that's exactly how the architecture of a neural network is set up, where you're right. There is no place where it already knows the answer. It has been fed and it has scanned and learned all of the answers at one point, right? And so now at the end of the day, it's a very powerful index, but it's not indexing the way that a search engine or a database is indexing. It's using embeddings and tokens, and it's calling on things based on other elements. And, that's sort of the simplest way to explain it.
I'm so glad that you bring this up. And I hate to shamelessly plug my own book over and over, but I wrote this book specifically because of what I was seeing around change. And that is, I've been involved in process for a long time. I've been involved in change and change management and bringing change into organizations. And many times I have noticed that when you bring change in, the immediate response is a limbic reaction. It's the lizard brain. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are the only 4 reactions. Everybody goes there. We are pre-programmed. We have evolved as a species that everything looks like a snarling bear, including the CEO going, we're going to make some great changes around here. I mean, in your mind, it is literally flash of red, claws, the whole works. That's just the way that we've evolved. Maybe a million years from now, we'll get beyond that. But right now, we don't separate work from the forest. They're the same damn thing. And I love what you had just said in your explanation, because now I need to write. I did a ebook for this one because it was shorter, like 42 pages, because I knew there was more there. And I think it's going to be about how the if-then is the limbic. It's all, the data's there. You just got to pull it from the database, and it's always going to be the same. It can't really be anything more than what's there. On the opposite side of that, generative AI is like that prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
It will take all of those data that's been fed, all the visual cues and audio cues and smells and taste. At some point, hopefully it can do those things too. And it will be able to then compile those things together and give you a result that is unique. It's not what it knows. It is a compilation of things. And some people say, and I had a guest on the show recently that said, it can't, that humans can create new things. AI can't. And I said, let me tell you, man, no caveman made the iPhone. There wasn't any cavemen out there with big screen TVs.
No.
It's iterative. The process is iterative. I can't build something unless I have seen something similar to it. It's the reason that you and I could sit here for the rest of the night and we can't come up with a brand new color that has no other colors in it. It just doesn't work that way, right? We can't create new things. Yeah. So all we're doing, all the AIs are doing is exactly what we're doing, using the prefrontal cortex, which separated human beings from animals, and developing that into something that can do it at a speed and with a power that would take hundreds of thousands or millions of brains to do.
I mean, so, and to sort of step on that and touch on that piece, I mean, if you compare it to the frontal cortex doesn't finish developing in a human until 25, and roughly, right? And if you use that frame of reference to where we are as a society with AI, we're like an infant, and we're trying to figure out
toddlers.
We're trying to make decisions off of the AI that we have right now, and we don't know enough. And as you get older, your frontal cortex finally sort of develops fully out, and you can start to make sound, logical decisions. That's bad, that's good, that hurts. With AI, and it's in its infancy right now, there's a bunch of stuff out there about the good and the bad about AI.
Sure.
And that's what I think all of us are also, we don't know. We don't know enough. We don't know what it's capable of. But your point about how it can't create anything new, I mean, it depends on the definition of new.
I think that's the key, right? If it's in the same way that humans can't create anything new, well, then we're both in the same level.
Correct.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, it's everything that we already know of, because it's been trained and it's learned off of everything what humans know. And then you could take it even a step further and go, okay, well, the only difference between that brain and human brain is free will, right? Like consciousness and free will. Yeah. And, it's
which is just a neurological pattern that hopefully at some point we'll be able to reproduce, and then we can apply it to machines.
Yeah. Well,
let's just be honest.
Yeah. I mean, if we do, then that's a scarier outcome, but that's where we need to put guardrails around the fact that, at the moment AI is a butler, so to speak, or, it's responding to, commands, and then where it doesn't know that it actually could make it, it has a choice and it could go left or right. And that, that's the part where there's a lot of press, there's a lot of opinions out there about, okay, there needs to be a lot of guardrails and governance around that.
I agree with you. I think the challenge with that, and, I saw of course, we've all seen that Elon Musk and a bunch of these guys came out and said pause, but I don't think they understand. And I think they do understand. I don't think anybody wants them to pause. I think they want government to jump in here and say, we've got to put a little bit of guardrails around this, because the Chinese, let's just be honest, they're nipping on our heels when it comes to AI. And the Chinese have a huge advantage over us. And that is that we still have the illusion that we have privacy in our data. The Chinese don't. The Chinese just automatically know everything that's in your refrigerator. I mean, they have, there's a whole program in China right now to get people washing machines and refrigerators and all these kind of things for very, very inexpensively, like a rent-to-own kind of program. Every one of those devices is connected to the internet. Yeah. They are literally, how many times a day do you open the refrigerator? What food do you take out each time? How what's your milk consumption per household? They are getting the data, and they're creating data lakes around human behavior that it will be another 10 years before we'll be able to publicly say what we're doing. I think the CMO of AI advertising was on a couple of times here, who's been using data lakes for 6.5, 7 years to determine political campaigns and doing all sorts of things. And it's like, it's a lot farther along than you think. I think, as he said in the show, the question is, are my devices listening? And he's like, it doesn't matter, because I already have everything. Like, we already know. It doesn't, at this point, it's just the period at the end of the sentence. Every time you've used a credit card, every movement. I tell people all the time, go to timeline.google.com and put in the date 10 years from now and see what happens. It's going to show you exactly every place that you were, how long you were there, where you ate lunch at, where you ate breakfast at, what time you woke up in the morning. Every bit of your data and life has already been tracked. And it has been for that train
I'll
left
have to
the station.
Check that out.
Timeline.google.com. It's pretty amazing. It's actually been used in court a couple times, actually, to get people off for crimes. They're just like, go look at my timeline.google.com. And they're like, nope, he was not anywhere near, or at least his device was nowhere near.
I'll say it's tough being a kid these days, because now your parents are going to just track you everywhere and every how you go. I mean, it's,
yeah. And as executives, we have to be conscious of that. I recently was talking to an executive and he said, it's like, we can't get anybody to pass the drug test. I said, well, stop testing for marijuana. Everybody will pass then. And he was like, well, but I'm like, dude, come on, stop. Like, it's not worth it. You're already having a hard time hiring people. Like, let's go on your way home to a dispensary, buy a joint, go home, smoke it. Trust me, you'll be fine. Nobody's ever overdosed on it. Yes, I don't want my truck drivers. I don't want, my surgeon, let's put some, guardrails around it.
So that's
yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, but understand, if you're hiring somebody for your warehouse or for your accounting department, does it matter? No, it doesn't really matter.
No, not at all.
I think you made some really good points there. Let's talk for a minute about these plugins, because that's where we started going. And I got us down a little bit of before we get way too far down the rat hole here, Josh, let's get into plugins and then we can go to town and finish this up.
Yeah. So
let's talk about them.
Yeah. So plugins are, so I'll say that the understanding of plugins and what they are. So the best analogy I can use is, think about when Steve Jobs first announced the first iPhone, and there was an app store, and he was trying to describe what the app store was. And I remember it vividly, of like going, what, like, I have no idea what this is. And my mind didn't get to that point. I was younger, but the App Store with the iPhone is exactly what ChatGPT or ChatGPT plugins to ChatGPT is. So all of these, so simple, examples right now are like Kayak or weather.com, where they've already built plugins for ChatGPT so that you can ask a question for ChatGPT and it can tap into real-time data and give you a response. Because the thing with a neural network, the thing with ChatGPT, is that it's trained based on a moment in time, right? So I believe ChatGPT 3 was trained in 2020 based off of the internet from 2021. 2021. Yeah. So GPT 4, I believe, was 22. But it can, it's trained based on that moment in time and previous. So the ChatGPT plugins are allowing companies to expose their APIs so that they can pump real-time data into a neural network. And so now take that and think about the fact that every company on the face of the planet, now think there's two sides, right? There's the authenticated side and the public domain. Public domain is, flights, weather, sports reports. And then there's the authenticated, which is sort of your private ChatGPT. That's where every company on the face of the earth is going to race to build a plugin, because it gets them exposure into surfacing results into ChatGPT. And that ties back into my statement about that's where SEO is going to go away. Because if everybody's data is plugged into this brain that can respond to anything you want, you're no longer needing to optimize yourself for a search engine. You're going to be surfaced in the moment when somebody asks a very specific question. And granted, people are asking questions on Google right now, but there's no context, there's no tone, frame of reference, all of that. And that's also why I think the way we surf the internet it's going to change, right? Like we're not going to go to Google anymore. We might go to Google, but it'll be a different interface.
It won't be that Google. Yeah, it'll be the new Google.
It'll be Google's Bard or whatever, right?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, at some point, then you have to, really ask the question of, how does Neuralink play into this kind of stuff, right? Where you just connect your brain directly to the AI and it takes all of your thoughts and memories. I told somebody this recently. I have a group of guys. We get together. We sort of call it the Philosopher's Circle, and we all get together and have a pizza and a campfire once a month. And as part of that, we started talking about this, and we started talking about like we will live forever. Like everybody that's sitting around that campfire that night will be here 100,000 years from now. Now, maybe not in a physical body, but our ideas and thoughts and contributions and the books that we've written and the podcast, this will all even if nobody listens to it anymore, it will still be alive because AIs will have fed from that data to create this collective consciousness. Yeah. And that's a pretty cool thing, right? That's a pretty cool thing to think that your ideas and thoughts and what we're recording right now will influence an AI that a million years from now is going to be advising people on, trends that are happening to them, which is a pretty cool thing to think about.
It's cool. And then my brain goes to the sort of the creative side, and I go, how much longer can we be, your point of creating something new? At what point does creativity dissipate, right? Like, at what point does because everything that's happened and everything is documented, at what point are we just repeating and spinning the circle around? Because it's a sort of a common topic and thread right now, which is like with AI and generative AI, at some point originality is going to go away or things are going to be repeated. And we've been repeating stuff for history, right? Like,
look at the music scene right now. If you're not sampling somebody, you're not doing it right. It is the truth. It is becoming more and more iterative, more and more based upon foundational things. And I think you're right, foundationally new ideas. Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, right?
Yeah.
I was lead singer of a band at that time, like a hair band, 80s band, right?
Nice.
And we were just like, we're at the top of our game. And then Nirvana comes out, and I'll never forget sitting in Bruce Schmidt's basement going, we're done. It's over.
You know, yeah,
you just hear the song and you're like, we don't do that. That isn't what we do. We're the glam guys. I had the big long thing and a big ponytail and the long hair, and we were all glitzed up and doing the guitars and things. And I'm like, we're done. It's over. Like it pivoted that way. And there are those fundamental changes. I think one of the guests recently said, and I really liked what they said. They said, imagine AI as a snowball rolling down a hill. It's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and gaining more and more mass. The problem is that from a percentage basis, the size of it is increasing. It'll increase very, very quickly at the beginning. But as it gets larger, just statistically, yes, it's adding more mass, but it's only getting fractionally larger and larger and larger at that point. And then there always comes a point with any type of snowball that it breaks up, and it becomes smaller snowballs that start to roll on their own and pick up things and pick up things and pick up things. And maybe that's where we evolve with this. I have a whole series we can get into here in a few minutes about how I have an evolutionary theory about AI, about how AI will apply the rules of evolution to itself to evolve. But yeah, this is interesting. Like, let's talk more about this. Where do you see the world 5, 10, 15 years from now? We talked about augmented organizations. This isn't replacing people. Is this embedded? What does this become?
Yeah. So I'll sort of feed off of something that was attempted, that was failed at IBM even. So when I was at IBM, we tried to roll out something called Watson Virtual Assistant, which was what you now know it as ChatGPT today, the AI assistant inside of your authenticated app, right? And so for the business world, it's the other side of the coin that I was saying. There's the authenticated world. And so we're going to generate, I think in 5-10 years, you're going to log into your ChatGPT interface that is either authenticated or public and be able to ask any, this will probably happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But you're going to
log in. Might happen since the time we started recording with the rate of change right now.
Exactly.
It's by the time we hang up, we're like, well, shit already happened.
But it's literally going to draw on every piece of information that's there, and it doesn't need to be structured. And I think the critical thing is that right now in our world, in our society, everything needs to be structured some way, shape, or form for us to actually make sense of it. And, you get into companies like ours, or there's a billion companies out there that deal with unstructured data and then make it structured for a company.
Yes.
Companies are all sitting on their own data. It's just a lot of them are and you probably deal with this all the time, the process it takes to structure it takes a process, and it takes tech and people. I don't think we're going to need to structure data for us to actually do the things that structured data needs to do. And that's where I think we're going to be.
I think you're right. I would say, I'm working with a lot of clients right now that we're struggling with this, right? We have no single source of truth. We have divergent systems. We're coming out of a period of time where businesses grew exponentially. And the problems grew exponentially as well, but sales covered all sins. Let's just be honest. Like as a process guy, former COO, when things are, when sales are like this, and I'm like, hey, board, I need a little bit of budget to improve their food. What are you going to save us, $1 million? Whoopee. They're just like, screw you, dude. Right. And now all of a sudden everybody's calling me going, hey man, how's it going? And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But you're right. In the short term, there is a period of time. And I appreciate what happens in economic cycles where you have a little bit of boom and bust, because during the bust is when we lean out, we get a little bit more efficient. We figure some of this stuff out. And then when the boom starts to come back in, because I think you're right. I think right now structured data is king. And you've got to, if you're not prepared for that, you need to start using it. Recognizing though, that at some point that will not become an issue. We'll be able to use large data lakes and be able to process AI against that will solve a lot of these problems. I think right now it's a good exercise for companies to go through and say, okay, what do we got and what do we need and what do we need to throw away? Because there is a perception too that all data is useful. And I can tell you as a process analyst, that is not always the case.
No.
I don't, one of the analogies we give all the time is we say, let's not try to make chocolate pies here. If something is shit, let's get rid of the shit and then let's bake it. Let's not bake shit into our process. Let's clean this thing up so that the data is pure. And we can start to use AI right now. I believe, and I know I'll be misquoted on this. I'll try to find it afterwards and post it to my followers. But I believe it was McKinsey that said that there is a clear distinction in the financial performance of public companies using AI and not using AI with Q1 results. Meaning their analysts can tell if a company is using AI by looking at their balance sheet and saying, yeah, these guys have an AI program. You're seeing small marginal improvements in bottom line numbers and reductions in operational costs, reductions in accounting costs, just little bits, but enough to tell you, they don't. IBM's been around for a long time. I bet you their balance sheet looks pretty similar year after year after year on their fixed costs. When you start to see those, move in the margin a little bit, you start to say to yourself, something's different. How that's what analysts look for, right? We don't look for we went from 12% to 26%. We were at 12.18 and we went to 12.19. Somebody needs to answer why that happened because it's not a fluke.
I mean, the AI can totally change that. So that's what we work with our e-commerce customers with.
Yeah.
The immediate benefit is like we can help or save them a body in writing copy and improving it. But the actual outcome is that we're helping improve their revenue or their conversions by 10 to 35%, right? Like that's what they care about, but they don't want to hear that at first because everybody's coming, I can help you convert this and I convert that, but how and at what cost? And AI comes with, the only cost is its hard costs or whatever vendor you're working with. Whereas people are spending $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 on a human to do something that could be, you can repurpose the human and focus the AI on, manual remedial product catalogs or anything, right? Like it's.
Yeah, I think you're so right there. And it is true. I mean, I know that we all in our own heads like to think we're efficient and we like to think we have capacity in our systems, but I can tell you, I mentioned this breakfast I was at this morning. First question I ask, how many of you believe you're at 90% or more efficiency in your business? Not a single hand is risen. No. And then I said, if you needed to increase your capacity by 20% tomorrow and you had no ability to hire new people, could you handle that? And there were like two people that sheepishly were like, maybe, and I'm like, okay, so that's why we have to get efficient on our process. We have to build capacity in our systems. Listen, I love, remember the show Friends? You might be a little too young for the show Friends.
No, I remember.
One of the greatest scenes ever is they're moving a couch up the stairs and Ross is yelling, pivot, pivot, pivot. You have to pivot to get this thing up the stairs. If your business is at capacity, you have zero ability to pivot. So it's way better to have your people working at 80% of their capacity by freeing up some things and automating your processes so that when things like ChatGPT come around, you can say, hey, you know what, everybody? One Friday a month, just fool around with ChatGPT. Don't do anything else. Don't answer the phones. Don't do anything. Let's try to learn something with our data on a Friday afternoon. I'll buy the pizzas and the Red Bulls. Let's try to figure this thing out. But you can't do that when the phone rings 24/7, 365. You have to have built-in capacity in your organization to take on these type of initiatives. It's the reason why most M&A fails. Most M&A fails is because neither party had the pivot ability to actually say, okay, you know what? Every Friday, we don't have anything going on. Let's all get together and sit down and figure this thing out. No, everybody's busy. And we want to utilize our resources to maximum capacity. But having a little bit of bench is not a bad thing. I have companies I consult for that I'm a bench. They don't call me all the time, but when they call me, they're like, this is a guy that knows our business. He reads our financials. He understands what's happening. He knows the people. We got a problem. Let's call him in because he's got that. He's on the bench waiting for it.
I mean, I'll say that's a really good thing to have as a resource. I think we're all regimented people. And so that bleeds into a business where, a company set in their ways. And that's, on the executive staff, that is your job to elevate the perspective and pull, whether it's your job or whether it's an advisor to the company or a consultant, somebody needs to pull you out of, you're going down the path and you could be headed for something bad and you came from something good, right? Like your revenue could be up and you think you're good, but you are absolutely heading into, a pit. And, you
especially when the market changes. I mean, it's really easy to look at your inventory and go, well, we have the proper amount of inventory. Yeah, but sales are down 10% over last year. So do you have the proper amount of inventory for last year's sales or the proper amount of inventory for this year's sales or really the proper amount of inventory for 3 months from now sales? Because that can be on a bigger company, a 10, 15, $20 million difference, which is going to destroy you if you don't realize that iceberg is sitting out there and you're trying to wield the Titanic. This capacity thing is a real issue for a lot of companies. And I know I've probably given the analogy on this show before, but I always tell people, look, you don't cut your own hair. You don't do it because you can't get the right perspective on it. When you got to look in the mirror and you got to try to figure this whole thing out, it doesn't work. You have to get up above that thing. And if you don't have capacity in your organization, you never have a chance to actually get out of there or bring in somebody else from the outside too, I think is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's perspective is everything in business and in life. And we will all get caught in it. And, you got to get pulled out or you got to have the awareness to pull yourself out.
I love, ChatGPT, just talking about that for a minute. This prompt engineering is so powerful because I think every episode I learned something new about how to prompt engineer. Mike Harushka was on a couple weeks back and Mike actually asked me, he's like, well, you do put the IQ of the audience in, right? I'm like, what? And he's like, it'll give you total different results if you say 98 versus 120 versus 143. Completely change its entire vernacular. I'm like, okay, now I always put the IQ in. I'm like, the IQ of the average person in the audience is this, I mean, if we think about generative AI, it's generating information based upon data, the data in the database or in that system, but also the data we feed it. When you and I are talking together, Josh, I can look at you and I can make some assumptions on your age, your wealth, your background, your education, your marital status. I see you're a dog lover. I can learn all these things about you. When I make an inquiry of an AI and I don't give it that information, guess what? It can't respond like a human being. But if I actually say, here's his age, he's engaged to a doctor, here's where he went to school, he loves dogs, lives downtown Phoenix, it's going to change things. I put zip codes in all the time now. I'm like, the audience lives in 85282, 120 IQ, average income of this, grew up in the Midwest, moved here 5 years ago, politically leans right, but is getting more liberal leaning since they moved to Arizona. You get a different result.
You're hitting on the sort of the end all be all of how at the moment ChatGPT and generative AI should be used. And I think a lot of people right now don't know how to go into that. And so to your point, when he gave you the perspective of give it, define where it's going to be giving you its results because it's tapping into, it could ace the test or it could be, it could flunk it. You need to know who you're talking to. And from our business, that's our, those are the inputs we talk to our customers about, going, who do you talk to? How do you talk to them? What's your tone? What age group are you talking to? Because all of that affects the results that are going to come out. And I think, so it's funny, I actually, I was doing research a couple weeks ago, and I stumbled on a guy who created a prompt it's the one end all be all prompts, right? So he created a prompt that you tell it what you want, and then in the prompt, he says, okay, now I want you to ask me 4 questions to improve the prompt. And so the prompt keeps coming back and saying, okay, now how old is the audience that you want? What do they like? And he'll answer the question. It'll rewrite the prompt again. And then it'll say, okay, within the people of age 16, and it'll go a level deeper. What kind of hairstyle do they have? And it just, and literally it will keep going until he says stop. It now has the completely baked prompt.
Perfect prompt.
Yeah, it's actually, I use it just daily.
It's amazing. I'm gonna absolutely. I actually did that with myself. I asked it to ask me 10 questions to know me better, and it did. It actually went through and said, like, how do you respond? Are you comfortable in front of people? And I actually went and fed it my culture index, my psychological profile. Okay. And said, oh, I'm a 9 out of 10 on logic. I'm this. And it came back and used those things and asked other questions around it. But I had never thought about doing it with just a general prompt. I was telling it to ask questions and get to know me, to build a persona. But I love that. I think it's a great, there's so many little tricks out there that we're all learning. Somebody asked me this morning, they said, what's the perfect prompt length? And I said, 500 words. And they were like, that's a lot. And I'm like, I'm kidding. But my point is, don't just type in good Thai restaurant near me. Yeah. It's not going to work. You're not going to get a result. The other thing I've mentioned a couple times on this show is I have found that it will lie. Particularly if you ask it to watch a video or listen to a podcast, you will usually have to inquire at least 4 times before it will actually listen to it. It will try to summarize it. It'll look at descriptions of it online. It'll look at all sorts of things, and it'll tell you what's in there. And then I'll actually respond back and say, you didn't watch it. And it'll say, okay, well, I'll watch it again. And then it'll come back. And then after the 4th time, I'm like, why are you missing all this? Because that stuff's in there. And then it does take an extra second. And then the prompt comes up and it'll apologize. It says, I'm sorry, I actually been trying to save space and memory. I did listen to the full thing now. Here is my assessment. I'm like, you little SOB. You're like a teenager. You're like lying to me about this stuff.
The frontal cortex hasn't developed yet.
Right. It hasn't. And listen, I guess with the amount of energy I can imagine that it takes to run the number of inquiries on that, it's going to try to save its own resources.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, listen, if you and I go out for a jog, do we sprint right out of the gate and just try to use it? No. We start at a slow pace. If it's a race, we wait until the end to really pour out the energy. It's doing the same damn thing.
And I'm sure somebody's got a hand in there, sort of hard coding things where,
guarantee you
100% limitation.
Well, I think the other thing, I've talked about this in the show, and a good friend of mine who's a CMO, early on, she had seen some of my posts about ChatGPT, and she said, we can't use it. It's way too sexist and way too misogynist. And she's like, we have a female audience, and this thing, it writes some stuff that we're like, this is not cool. And I told her about personas. And I'm like, well, you've got to explain to it that you're a female to disclude any results from males. And she got back to me and she's like, damn, it's a lot better. And I said, if you ever had a question if human beings were racist and misogynist, ChatGPT has proven it. Because all it is just a compilation of everything that's on the internet. Yeah. And it does tend to be a little bit of a dick. It's like, okay, maybe it's
good representation of society in 2022. Like, snapshot.
You really can't deny that it is somewhat all of those things. And it will say some things that aren't, appropriate because that's what the internet says. We're looking at a whole roll up of the internet.
Yeah, to your point earlier when you were saying that, like, anything that is creative will never go away. We're never going to escape some of the things that have, anything that the tracks have been laid, history has been written, but now history is etched in stone. Something that happened 200 years ago was hearsay, or, somebody had to be there to witness it. That does not exist anymore. It has changed the way that we operate as human beings.
And I think it goes back to the marijuana thing too. And it says, look, if you're a CEO and you're going to pass on somebody because of their Instagram photos, Come on, seriously. Remember when you were 18 years old, some of the shit you did in college? Like, just remind yourself, if social media was around, you would be the king of of ridiculous posts.
It just didn't exist, so it didn't happen. You know, you hear all these stories, and I'm a huge sports fanatic. You hear all these stories in sports about guys growing up. You know, I grew up with like the Derrick Jeters and Tiger Woods of the early days, and those guys didn't have social media that was rampant. God knows what they were doing. And we know what Tiger Woods did, but you know, like the point is the guys that are in it now are scrutinized to the 10th degree, right? Like you can't,
and there's a reason. Listen, there is a golf tournament. One of the gentlemen you just mentioned has a golf tournament every year in Vegas. I'm not going to say anything about it other than you have to leave your cell phone. Your cell phones are confiscated. You cannot leave the hotel. The security makes sure there are no electronic devices within 1,000 yards of those type of celebrities because they understand you can't, I mean, and listen, not that they're, out doing crazy stuff. I'm not going to say if they are or they aren't. I'm just going to say you can take stuff out of context very easily.
Oh,
and you can deep fake. And, we had Peter Cison on here from Certify It here recently. The deep fake problem is so deep and so big that you really shouldn't trust anything you see on the internet. And I mean, really anything at this point, because it's just, unless it's got a stamp on it and it's on a third-party server that can verify it's never been tampered with. Sorry, no Photoshop. It has to be raw data, raw video.
It's very disappointing because it's ruining our authenticity and our ability to be authentic. And it's just, I mean, that's my sort of top down sort of disappointment with where society is now, because I just feel like people don't know what's real. So then in turn, it also affects how they are and how authentic they are and if they can be real or not. And, hopefully it can get better, but
as somebody that's got a following, I agree with you. There's certain topics. I'm doing a photo shoot here in 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about some things like therapy. And I've had other executives say to me, "Man, you really want to talk about a topic like therapy and like getting?" And I'm like, there's a lot of good that can come from those conversations. The problem is nobody really has the testicular fortitude to get out there and say, "Hey, look, maybe a lot of the problems that we're having in our society is guys that grew up being told you can't cry, you can't show emotions, you can't do any of this kind of shit." And then everybody in their family, I literally have a friend who listens to the show. I'm not going to say your name. Recently, we started talking. He said, my entire family was killed in a plane crash when I was a little kid, right? And I was the only survivor. And we were like, what?
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, but, can't really talk about it. I don't want to get emotional. It's like, whoa, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Right? So some of these things, I think you're right. We all have this persona we want to put out there, but sometimes the vulnerability is way better. Because I do believe that people see, it's why I think podcasts are so popular anymore. And I've had CEOs tell me that they won't buy from somebody that doesn't have a podcast because they're like, I can't get all I get is that polished shit from their ad agency. I don't know what Josh is really about until you watch an hour-long interview and you have these deeper conversations about things, and it's not as polished and it's a little bit more raw and emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why my editor, I always tell him, I'm like, I don't want you to cut out all the ums and coughs and buts because that sounds like something I saw on Fox News. It doesn't sound like the conversation I had in my backyard, over a bottle of champagne 2 weeks ago at a brunch. I think that authenticity is something that's really missing. And I think long form content is where it's at.
100%.
Because you get it out.
I'll say that's sort of the reason why I'm like, I fend away from, the TikToks of the world, and the short form content for me is there's much respect to people putting it together. It's just, I don't even know what's real anymore. I don't know. And it's funny, and it's entertaining, but like, I don't spend too much time digesting it because I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea.
And I'll tell you, I have a TikTok influencer that I'm become friends with here recently. And I'm very envious of his following, and I'm very envious of, millions of people see his videos, and he's very envious of the long form. He's like, I don't know how the heck you do that. How do you talk to somebody for an hour? It's like,
this is my,
how do you make something relevant for an hour? He's like, I'm trying to get into 15 seconds, dude. I mean, it was funny. I hired, it's just a crazy story for listeners. I think you'll all appreciate this. My video editor and my audio editor that I use for all my podcasts, I told him, I said, we got to get on TikTok. You got to start making shorts. he started making shorts, and he and I would watch them together. And I'm going to be 50 next month. He turns 50 in June. And we're just laughing. We're like, these are fucking terrible. Like, they're just terrible. We have no idea what we're doing. So I reached out to my nephew, who is 21 years old. And I said, hey, can you do some shorts for us? He sent them to me. I was really appalled. I was like, this is terrible. The cuts are bad, like flashy stuff and like shooting in on my face and like poop emojis in front of my eyes and all. Yeah. Start sharing them. Immediately they start going viral.
Really?
I'm like, yep. I'm like, okay. So the problem is a 50-year-old can't cut content like that. And then the interesting thing is, as I started posting the content and I started looking at other influencers' content, they all do the same things. These herky-jerky camera movements. And they put like, they literally do this head follow thing so that the camera follows you. And to me, it's annoying as hell. See, but the other thing is, the first one, I got to tell you this quick, first one that comes back, I said, Cameron, every one of these has something misspelled in it. He goes, well, yeah, of course. Like, well, check your spelling. He goes, you don't want to check your spelling. It's called social engineering. He's like, you have to have something misspelled in it. That's how you get comments. I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, read about it. Like, educate yourself. And I read about it. And all the main influencers are like, you always mispronounce people's names. You always do these things because people will then comment, which beats the algorithm. So you go viral.
And you stand out. That's
just crazy to me.
Oh my God. So you made the smartest decision by delegating that to somebody who actually understands the audience. Like,
my 21-year-old nephew gets
totally it. Like 100%. I mean, why waste any of your time when you're like, that was the smartest thing you could have done, honestly.
It really is. And he's done just an incredible job. And sometimes I have to say to him, like feeding a prompt, and I know he'll watch this because he's going to be cutting all these videos out. Cameron, you can use this one for yourself if you like. But sometimes I do have to say, okay, this is actually for an executive audience. It doesn't have to be 15 seconds. Let's do a 3-minute segment on this. He's like, okay, I can do that, right? Or he's come back to me and said, some of your guests are just too long-winded. And I'm like, these are heavy-duty influencers. They're not long-winded. They're storytellers. They're used to communicating with executives. They're used to getting to a punchline and setting things up. You got to let things evolve. And he's like, it doesn't work on TikTok. I'm like, that's okay. I don't need, put it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, put it somewhere totally fine. And it's generational too. I digest the shortest form I digest is probably 3 minutes. And if I'm on any social media, it's actually YouTube. And YouTube is what's feeding me stuff that it knows I like. And their shorts are about 3 minutes on there, depending on what I tap into. Yep. I don't go any shorter than that because I have a longer attention span than 7 seconds.
Yeah, I do too. And I think, but it is true. I think that's why some of this long form content like podcasts like this are getting interesting too. People listen to them at 2 times speed. Yeah. Let's just be honest. Your voice is not going to sound like this when people listen to it because we all listen to it too. I mean, I consume Audible books. Between Audible and Blinkist, I read like 15 books a week. Between the two of those, and I do them at high speed. I'm trying to get data into my brain and process. But it's really interesting where it's going. Let's do this. We're almost at an hour, so I know we're way over time for a podcast. But I'd like to let's just spend a few minutes here at the end thinking about together. Where does this go? First and foremost, do you believe that AI will achieve a singularity at some point and be AGI and be better at us than everything?
Yes. And
how soon it would be the next question.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it goes back to my statement of free will and consciousness. Yeah. When it gets to the point where it can understand that the things it's being told and the questions it's being asked, it can have, I'll say, control over that. That's when it will achieve that. And honestly, it probably will get there in the next 10 years. I mean, it could be faster.
It's interesting. And I asked this as sort of a setup question, but, guests a year ago were saying, well, by the end of the century, we'll get there by the end of the century. Guests in the last 6 months have gone more I've had people tell me as short as 36 months and as long as maybe 20 years. But nobody anymore thinks this is as far out as we once thought. They think that it is possible and it's the potential is there. I wonder what the world looks like after that's achieved, because at that point, there's nothing that we don't really know. We can run every math equation in the universe at that point. My friend Aaron Bear calls it, exponential. I call it a tetrahedron. A tetrahedron is just exponential in every direction all at once.
Yeah.
It is essentially what won the Oscar this year. I think it was, anything everywhere all at once. I mean, it becomes something that we as human beings can't quite understand just yet, what the world will be like when, we don't need to use our prefrontal cortex or even our limbic system to respond to the world, but the world can be responded, to us faster by a computer. That is it's a transhuman evolution essentially.
I'll give you a positive take on an interesting way that I'm hoping that we can go with this, which is right now, and we've sent out. So I'm going into space, right? So we've sent out satellites and aircrafts that are going deep into space that we've never seen or understood. It feeding information back that we don't have the ability to understand. My hope is that AI can be the thing that either translates it, analyzes it, or makes it make sense so that we can digest it. Because honestly, space is the only thing that we don't really understand. We have we make large assumptions based on large amounts of data, but we don't really understand it. That is the last thing. And I truly believe, I don't know when, I don't know how long, it will be able to help us understand something that we have never understood. And if it can do that, I love space. Like, I love thinking about space.
I do too.
The concept of it. I could talk for days. I love telling people that don't understand that stars are actually a snapshot from 1 million years ago.
Yeah.
Like I love explaining to somebody how the speed of light works. Yes. And they're like, wait a second, what? Like they're almost paralyzed for a second. I'm like, yep. That's my hope. I really think that if we can get data to travel from that far out, or we bring those vehicles back and then digest the data, whether it's video, image, whatever, that's my hope.
And I think some of that is going to, Praveer Malik, who was on just a couple weeks back, he's 22 books on quantum physics and quantum computing, and his theory on the quantum world flies in the face of what most quantum physicists believe right now. He has a belief that there is some light out there that is not restricted by the speed of light, and that light is omnipresent, omnipotent. It is everywhere all at once. It essentially animates the entire universe, this little bit. And he's like, it could be smaller than an atom. We just don't know. It's just this one particle that is broken away that's been able to animate this whole entire thing. And I think there's a lot to that. I think there's a lot about, he and I talked about how some of the problems I think we have as human beings right now in understanding the world is we're using outdated models to understand the world. I think we still have a very Earth-centric view of the universe.
Yeah.
Rightly so. I mean, here we stand. My hope is, like yours, that our perspective will be broadened to a point where we can see our bigger place in this whole thing, understand, how important it is. And I think at that point, maybe we can actually achieve some sort of world peace from that. Because, I'll never forget Ronald Reagan, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, said something, and I asked my dad about it. My dad didn't even completely understand it. But Ronald Reagan said, what we need is an alien invasion. If the aliens showed up tomorrow, there would be no Soviet Union against the United States. There would be no China. Everybody would join together and say, okay, we have a common enemy. We got this. Let's all get our shit together and let's go after this thing. We need that. We need that moment where we see ourselves as one on this planet in order to truly achieve any sort of equity, of people on the planet. And I think you're right. Maybe JWST can do that. I mean, the James Webb Space Telescope is mind-boggling, the things that they're discovering. There was actually, and I'll have to find it, I'll see if I can post it on the website. There was an announcement about 3 months ago by two people on a podcast from the James Webb team. And they said, there's a few things that we've discovered that we've decided not to share with the public just yet. And we need to do a little bit of analysis first and understand, not that we doubt the data, but we need to understand how people are going to respond to some of the things that we found.
Wow.
And I was like, oh man,
wow.
We're trying to be alive when they're looking out into the far reaches of the universe and they're like, we found some unexpected things that we need to contemplate a little bit more.
Oh, that's great.
Talk philosophy, talk a little bit more about our place in the universe before we can break this news. And that to me is fascinating. I mean, I would never, there's no other time in history that I would want to live than right here, right now.
Oh, I mean, if you just think of the advancements in the last 20 years, where my mind goes, where we can, but for me, that is the ultimate excitement is it's beyond Earth. It's like, if we can learn things about, because I've always been the sort of the interstellar question, asker of, and I am like dead set in my mind. I'm like, there 100% is living things further out there. It's just where and what do they look like and is it a they or whatever, right? But that is like the ultimate. I could die in peace after we learn that stuff.
Right. I mean, well, and then you'll live on forever on the internet, so you're not even dead, right?
Exactly.
We'll figure it out in the petri dish. We'll reanimate you. We'll grab a little of your DNA, and bam, Josh is back. 100,000 years in the future.
Beautiful.
As chief product officer of Digitile 3.0.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the conversation. This was very interesting. I love how we made this real transition. And I feel like, and I hope the listeners do too. I know I've been hearing some great feedback from people that are like, it's the last 20 minutes I'm listening for now, right? They're like, I'm sort of ignoring everything you guys do in the first 45. And then I just fast forward to that last 20 minutes where it gets real philosophical and really deep. Josh, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you and about Digitile, how do they do that?
Yeah, sure. So digitile.io. And then I'll say I'm not a big social media guy. You can find me on LinkedIn though. LinkedIn/Josh Topel. I hit me up. I love to chat about anything AI. And then obviously if you're in the e-commerce space, love to help you if you have problems to solve.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Thank
Josh.
you, Derrick.
Thank you
I
all for
appreciate
tuning in. Yeah, you got it. Thank you all for tuning into the Convergence. All right, that's a wrap for this episode of the Convergence. Who will be our special guest next week? Well, we've got a bunch of people in the hopper that we're recording with, so we'll have to see who it's going to be. But I'm excited about the direction. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go over to YouTube. Check out my new book, Adaptagility. It's right over there on Amazon right now. Available for sale. Been getting great reviews. I'm going to do an extended version of it because I am getting people that are like, ooh, it's just enough that it got me really interested in this topic. But how do we think about evolution and our human evolution and how it works in conjunction with all of the change that's going on in our society right now? What lessons can we learn from human evolution, and what obstacles and barriers are we going to have to overcome? All right, until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.